How's it going? Today is 27th of December, Friday, and we're gonna be taking a look at a market and what kind of opportunities we can find. Everyone's still on holidays, which is great. There isn't that many press releases, right? So perhaps we're gonna be reflecting on what kind of press releases will be available, and we're gonna begin by taking a look at Lithuania. From there, we're going to be progressing and taking a look at UK, Turkey, and Norway in just a bit. First, let's take a look at what might be a lot of money, right? And our expenditure that Lithuania must spend 5.5% of GDP on defense to create division by 2030. Let's try to understand it. I haven't read it and what's happening, right? Lithuania needs to allocate 5.5% of its GDP to defense to establish a military division by 2030. Okay, we really need. I keep saying it's a lot of money. 5.5% of GDP to implement the program as planned by 2030. This isn't just about the division, it's formation in terms of people, but also about armaments, reserves, infrastructure as well. Okay. There's a lot of projects, and I'm not sure if we can discuss. There's a lot of things happening there, right? If anything, when it comes to reflection, we're gonna touch on some of the projects, perhaps what, in terms of infrastructure, what should be at the center of attention, perhaps, but that will be just an opinion. We're gonna do that in just a second. There's a lot of projects currently being done, but either way, we're not discussing those. Earlier in the thing, I could consider this regarding European fiscal discipline rules. Okay, that's never good when it comes to borrowing, perhaps. Rules to ensure the division is fully developed in Lithuania armed forces with the time frame. Okay. Defense officials estimate that current funding level, Lithuania military division will only achieve full operational capability by 2036 and not 240 rather than 2030 as originally planned. No, Syria had, or perhaps some of the leadership has also said that bringing the timeline forward to 2030 will require 10 billion to 14 billion euros in defense funding over this period, in addition to what is currently projected, right? So that's how many billions, but we're potentially taking a look at. That's about right. Next year's state budget initially allocated about 2.5 billion euros to defense, or just over 3% of GDP. However, the new government increased that to 2025 borrowing limit by roughly 800 million euros again. So that's what I mean. It's so much capital might be wasted. So I thought perhaps we can take a look at what will be important, since other governments are approaching the subject completely different. So I thought if we were to take a look at some of the projects and where to begin, perhaps that would be overall frame with wheels, right? Can Lithuania do this kind of in stages, right? When it comes to the first stage, can they have talented engineers? Can they develop their own frame with wheels, right? From there, we can progress into phase one. That will be phase one, phase two, phase three, phase four, and progress from there. Material cost for this kind of project will be very low compared to we are taking a look at tens of billions, right? That would be something. Then it comes to raising capital, not necessarily just purchasing things, but just raising capital, perhaps. That would be an additional way how Lithuania might consider raising capital by developing some of those projects themselves, right? As well as, since we were to look at perhaps some of the hardware and how any government can raise capital by developing some of those projects, right? And selling potentially those projects in order to raise capital, not necessarily borrowing money. That's what they're interested in doing at this stage, right? When it comes to raising capital, developing some of those frames with wheels, and from there progressing into depending on some of those uses, right? From there, I thought we might as well touch on the software as well, not necessarily just hardware, Perhaps we can touch on software as well. That Lithuania has making significant strides in the tech startup scene. So perhaps there might be a lot of startups when it comes to doing everything at the cost, right? Compared to some of the governments up there who have a lot of resources, right? So we are taking a look at creativity, right? And software development potentially. Some of those projects I have read a few, just so we're staying on the same subject. Perhaps had to be Cast AI infrastructure engineering platform for businesses, which has seen substantial investment and all has engineering center in Lithuania. Okay, so that's good, I guess. I don't know these projects, right? As well as Occipit, a biology startup applying AI for medical images analysis. Great. Trafi, known as its mobility as a service platform. Okay, great. Vinted, all true a household name by now. Vinted, okay, so that's a fashion. Let's progress. Amlies focus on financial crime prevention. Okay, sure. Nano Avionics, aerospace engineering startup. Perhaps Lithuania might be interested in considering launching more this type of startups, right? And also supporting quite a few of those engineering teams who can develop some of those startups, right? Known as small satellite mission integration and all has raised substantial funding for their propulsion systems development. So that would be a caliber of more startups that will be required instead of purchasing some of the software and hardware from overseas businesses, right? Perhaps that would be an alternative approach of how to allocate some of the funds locally. As well as we can take a look at the examples of some of those governments out there who are progressing. So we were potentially taking a look at phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and how to develop entire project, right? As well as some of the examples of some of the businesses who are operating up there. That would be that's just an example. Perhaps there might be a lot of things happening, right? But anyway, unmanned area vehicles, and there is a business there who are successfully test fires supersonic missiles. So there is a platform which can fly, as well as they can launch in different projectiles of this kind of platform, right? So that's potential capabilities that a lot of governments might be interested in, and there are some projects who, as of now, have their own capabilities when it comes to manufacturing some of those platforms, right? That would be Turkish high-altitude unmanned combat area vehicles. Let's keep names manufactured by Turkish defense company. Successfully test fire a HAA 230 missile Friday, capable of hitting targets as a distance of up to 140 kilometers. But that's potentially depends on what kind of missile they might be using, right? But that is just an example of some of the developments, as well as UAVs 230 missile fired by this flying system or platform hit the point in 140 kilometers away from the Baltic Sea with direct strike. So that would be some of the developments, right? But as well as there's different articles that are available up there. So that would be just an examples, right? Uh, by the way, we're not looking to promote violence or any that sort of activity. What we're looking at is best use of capital. That would be manufacturing and having to build their own capabilities when it comes to manufacturing capabilities, right? For many governments, that's the only thing what we're taking a look at, and some of those platforms are meant for defense purposes, not necessarily depending on the people who are using some of those platforms, right? As well as if we were to take a look at firearms, all these kind of things that could be seen as promoting violence. We're not promoting violence. Let's take a look at some of these articles simply that will be published today, Friday 27. Again, we will jump to UK and some of those examples, right? That will be UK steel industry calls for government to buy British in offshore wind push, right? So potentially where they would be sourcing some of the steel from. Since a market, competitive market, perhaps other governments can manufacture at a better price, but by doing so, they would strangle their own industry when it comes to steel industry, as well as we coming back to and promoting manufacturing and having these capabilities. Any government should have their own capabilities when it comes to manufacturing. That's the only thing what we're taking a look at. We're not promoting any other than better use of capital and or manufacturing costs, perhaps. We will take a look at some of those businesses. We won't gonna be delving deeper into the subject when it comes to steel or British steel, right? But anyway, only 2% of steel used in the British offshore wind project is past 5 years was UK-made study finds, right? And input cost, right? Not necessarily just energy cost. As of now, in UK, case, too high. Energy cost is too high. But other input costs, perhaps major factors as well. But anyway, we were delving deeper when it comes to perhaps how the steel could be produced, as well as where could be used at a large scale, right? Anyway, UK steel industry has called for government to promise, okay, that's to buy as if British as it prepares for major expansion of offshore wind generation. Okay, so that potential energy sector and to have this kind of energy. So perhaps there might be way of how to approach the same subject, right? So if they need steel, and steel needs a lot of energy, and if steel needs a lot of energy, that steel could be used to produce energy. If that makes sense. Anyway, wind generation has become a key part of UK's energy system, contributing 29% of generated electricity in 2023. However, despite the huge increase in number of turbines, only 2% of the steel used in British offshore wind projects over the past 5 years was made in the UK, according to a study by consultants. Okay, we don't know this company, right? The British industry was the government's aim to dramatically increase the proportion of the business. Okay, let's progress without delays. Preparing for publish a new steel strategy. Okay, there's a steel, which is, by the way, it's very important to have this kind of capabilities as well as cost. If they would be able to drive down the cost, that would be very important, and particularly when it comes to perhaps energy and how much energy would consume. Anyway, in the spring, that we'll look at how to increase the steel capacity and or capability for UK, even as the industry struggles with the cost of decarbonizing. I know investing in the new equipment, investing into new. There's so many things happening, right? But anyways, we're only taking a look at important part. That would be how much of the steel would be used and locally sourced. So 2% only. Let's progress and let's take a look at the next article. Let's touch on this article. I haven't read it. It might be important when it comes to trains and or deliveries, right? And or potentially perhaps I haven't read it yet, right? But anyway, let's try to understand. From dream to reality. Go up. There's there might be a lot of I don't know, it's people, right? Perhaps we can reach out to the entire team and see how we can work together. Perhaps they might be interested in expanding to wider areas. I don't know what kind of partnerships they might be interested, as well as what kind of sectors they might be interested in engaging with. They might be interested in grocery stores, and or would that be shipping only? So there's a lot of things might be happening. But anyway, with approval from run trains between Swindon, Taunton, and West Supermare, service could start in 2026. The idea for the country's first cooperative rail service came to, okay, let's progress without names, 2004, after another frustrating trip across, okay, Somerset. Okay. I would say again, prices, and or perhaps if we can engage with team. There's some of the projects that we were taking a look at previously when it comes to different type of trains. So by doing so, perhaps we can reduce time. I don't know about safety, but we can perhaps reduce time to move from point A to point B, as well as cost, right? As well as the battery trains would require a lot of electricity again. So we were taking a look at wind potentially, but there's a lot of things, right? Having moved to some of those places 4 years earlier with the young family, his job as a co-operator development manager involved daily trips across the Southwest trying to set up member-owned business. Okay. Reluctant motorists quickly became frustrated with the rail services was depending on the ground, right? Oh, anyway, so I believe in that particular area there was a train museum. I believe I myself had the chance to visit a train museum. So perhaps there's a lot of things to unpack, but let's move on. Perhaps there's more things. Well, most passengers will grumble and will leave it as it is. This person took on a matter on his own hands, right? If there is a contact information, perhaps we can reach out as well as add in all the details, right? I know who are all the partners. If anything, let's see how we can engage and making sure it would be a success, all these initiatives. Since we were coming back to Lithuania, right? We have extended their own rail services across Baltic, and they completely restructuring when it comes to how wide gauge is, as well as how profitable or not profitable it can be, right? But anyway, so perhaps it's very risky, if anything. But that's life and it's business, right? So perhaps we can reach out to the team and see if we can help, right? Just to touch on running some of those services and how costly it can be. Not necessarily these particular ones, but that is just an example of what's happening in Europe. That would be new estimate says Rail Baltic will cost about 15.3 billion euros. There's was a lot of work that had to be completed when it comes to increasing gauges, right? I believe, but anyway, the implementation cost of the first project phase, which aims to build an operational Rail Baltic line across three Baltic states connecting Poland by 2030, is estimated to reach 15.3 billion euros, said release from there's some projects, I don't know, as companies. The joint venture is responsible for the project, which originally had a price tag of 5.8 billion euros, right? So potentially some of these projects more or less can increase threefold, right? That's what we're focusing on when it comes to delivering some of those projects. If it was projected 5.8 and it had to this point increased 3 times, so there's a lot of things, inefficiencies and all unpredicted, perhaps obstacles. But when it comes to not necessarily just Europe, we were taking a look at some of the examples happening in UK. The, there's a lot of things happening, right? So let's close on that. Thanks for watching. See you next one.